Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. You may have noticed if you've been a long time listener, I guess we've been doing this about 3 years now. The intro is a little different. I took the voiceover off the audio. And the reason for that is I announced a few weeks ago the Grow Network's forum has closed. Grow Network's still around. The classes, the resources, you can still get that off their website. But the forums have closed. So unfortunately, I am no longer a moderator at the Grow Network forum. So I'm not sure if I'm going to re-record a voiceover or just go with the guitar. People have told me so many times they love hearing me play that tune. And that tune is Windy and Warm. It's my own version, but I chose it for a very special reason. You see, it was written by John D. Loudermilk, North Carolina native songwriter. Went to Nashville, wrote a lot of music. Made famous by Chet Atkins, huge influence in my playing. But I learned to play it from Doc Watson growing up, around Boone, Watauga County area of North Carolina. Doc was the local legend. Of course, he's considered to be one of the greatest guitar players of all time. And I followed him everywhere. If he was playing anywhere, I would go and just get as close as I could and watch him play and then go home and try to learn, what he played. And he was very friendly and very nice to me. And it was just a huge influence on my life, that period of trying to be a professional musician. I never quite made it, but I think, I learned to play guitar pretty darn well. And I think I'm proud of that version that I came up with myself, and people have told me they just love it. In fact, a lot of people have said, can I just get a copy of this song, just you playing this song? And so I actually did put a video of it on Rumble. So if you want to download it, you can absolutely do that. You can have me playing that tune as your ringtone, or if you just, a lot of people say it relaxes them, and it is a very relaxing tune, and it's also so appropriate for where I live in the mountains of North Carolina, where it's often windy, and in the summertime can be quite warm. So anyway, like I said, not sure if I'm going to do a new voiceover or just leave it as a clean audio recording, because people have said they really love it. And that's me playing at the end too. That's an old Jerry Reed song called Winter Walking that I'm just doing a voiceover on. And if you listen to my Catholic podcast, you can hear me playing Merle Travis's "I'm a Pilgrim." Really, probably going to try to do some more with music in the next year or so. In fact, I've been working on my own kind of chord system, my own it's actually my own method of teaching that I've been working on, and those who can do and those who can't teach, right? So I never made it big in Nashville. That's an old saying, by the way. I know it'll offend some teachers out there, but I am actually a pretty good musician, play several instruments, and pretty good teacher. I think, well, that's why most people listen to this podcast, just because you enjoy my teaching about herbs. But I came up with a really kind of, I guess, revolutionary way of teaching the mandolin. And really, several instruments are going to fall into this category. I'll probably do some lessons on guitar, tenor banjo, various, maybe ukulele, who knows. Um, any stringed instrument, especially a fretted instrument, is really going to fit in this system very well. So probably next year, January, February, I'll announce some free video lessons and probably publish an accompanying book. So if you ever thought you might want to learn to play the mandolin, I'm going to start with the very basics of choosing a mandolin, setting up the mandolin so you get the best tone out of it. The very basics, the very basic chords, the very basic scales, really all the way through jazz. And I mean, it's growing up in the bluegrass world. I'll never forget the first time I looked at some sheet music. First of all, I could not read, so I was just looking at the chords. I had to teach myself to read music, and now I sight read no problem. But it was something like a E flat 11. Let's see. Flat 9, sharp 11, or something crazy like that. And I had no idea what to play. Really, my system would teach you very quickly to look at any chord and be able to play it anywhere on the neck using any voicing, do chord melody, single note solos. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's I'm not going to promote it a lot on the herbal podcast. We'll stick to herbs and foraging and all that, but it'll just be another fun thing I can kind of I can offer y'all. And I've been doing this about 3 years and got a great audience. I really appreciate every one of you. I try to kind of go the extra mile when you subscribe to my Southern Appalachian Herbs newsletter. That's Judson Carroll Master Herbalist newsletter at judsoncarroll.com. And by the way, the best email address to get me now is judson@judsoncarroll.com. The other's still active, but I do most of my professional communication through there. When you sign up for that newsletter, you not only get this show each week, you get a free article each week that is the most detailed monograph of any herb that I know of. I mean, of the most detailed monograph I know of any herb. I really try to go the extra mile on that. And you get my Herbal Medicine for Preppers podcast, which most people actually don't get unless they are members of the Prepper Broadcasting Network. So always pleased to do that, and I'll be pleased to offer some music lessons. And once I get set up in the new location, like I said, I'd really like to offer some cooking lessons and gardening lessons and such as well. And that'll be both in person and online through my newsletter, my Substack newsletter that you can get at judsoncarroll.com. So, if you're interested in any of those things, signing up for that main newsletter, the Judson Carroll Master Herbalist newsletter. I keep you updated on everything I do, even, wood carving and different things, various plant walks and classes I might be offering. If you know anybody, forward this podcast to them. Forward the link for the newsletter to them. It's free. It's optional if you want to pay for my newsletter. I know that's a crazy thought. But those who pay, I give them free books. So they do get rewarded for being a paid subscriber. They also can contact me anytime, and I answer questions and, give them my opinions or my information depending on what they're asking about. There are some perks that go along with being a free subscriber, but I've said from day one, one of my biggest problems with herbal education is that it's cost prohibitive for many people. And so I want this information to be used by everybody, all levels, from the poorest to the richest. If, it's often kitchen medicine, it's things you can find in your backyard. I don't believe in barriers to entry, whether it's monetary or, when I use a complicated or old-fashioned archaic word, I try to define it so you know what I'm talking about. And and if you don't, just send me a message and tell me, and I will send you the definition. But I really do try to keep this just as, it's like I learned from Doc Watson. He would go out there. Doc would be playing in front of 40 or 50,000 people. I mean, literally I mean, the Grateful Dead used to come try to learn guitar from him. I mean, he was literally one of the greatest guitar players ever lived. Great showman, great singer, and he was blind. And he'd go out there in front of 40, 50,000 people. He might be at Carnegie Hall or Merlefest or on a big, television special. And he'd just sit down, just as comfortable as could be, and he'd say hello to people. He'd say, I want you to just be as comfortable as you would be in my own living room. And that was his approach. And that was also, I think you can hear that's a big influence on how I do my show and how I interact with my listeners. And yeah, so very appropriate to have Windy and Warm as my intro. So let's go ahead and get into the herbs. And it's obviously spring. It's very nice spring in most places now. And let's start with the foraging. We'll do the recipe first, and then we'll get into the medicinal herb, which is one you're going to really be interested in. It's a very, very useful herb, and it's actually both medicinal and edible, so you're going to want to know that one too. But this is one of the main entry points on foraging. I think the thing most people would pick first and eat is probably going to be dandelion greens or a wild blueberry or something, right? Cattails. Cattails are so easy to identify. They're going to grow in any damp spot. Usually, certainly by any pond, any kind of slow spot in a river or creek, ditches. They're always growing in drainage ditches. That's not the best place to harvest them. It really depends, as always, as we say in permaculture. Some actually very rude person tried to nail me down on a question last night as if I was going to say, well, this is always the answer. And I said, no, it depends. As we say in permaculture, it depends. Everything is situational when it comes to what is appropriate, especially when we use nature. I don't believe in situational ethics or morals, but I do believe in situational foraging and herb harvesting or tailoring your herbal remedy to the person, not just saying this does this and that's that, because that person's constitution can be absolutely different from another's. So, and age and health. I wouldn't give an older, frail person or a young child a poke tincture, for instance. It could kill them. Or a large dose of lobelia, or really even a moderate dose. That's just, one of two herbs that I use in fairly large amounts that most people cannot and should not. So no, I finally said, I'm not communicating with you anymore, and cut off communications with that lady because I'm not going to give you an answer I'm not comfortable with. That's why I don't give out cancer remedies. It's too serious, and it's also too individualistic. I give, when I come across an herb and I'm talking with you about it, and I say, and it says, in a source that I trust, this herb has been used as a folk cancer treatment. I always say, I don't know. You're going to have to research that and make your own decisions. I don't think it's, I just don't think that's responsible. But anyway, let's talk about cattails. The reason you wouldn't want to forage for them in a ditch beside a road or a field, and in that case I'm talking more of an actively farmed field. If it's been sitting barren for decades, then I don't worry about that. Or a pasture. I don't worry about pastures so much. I'm talking places where they may be actively spraying pesticides, or where chemicals, petroleum, oil, gas, whatever, diesel, can run off of a road in a rain. That can really contaminate anything that grows in those ditches, especially plants that prefer a damp environment. They tend to take in a lot more water. So if you have a clean spot, cattails are a wonderful source of food. They can really be eaten any time of year. The roots are tubers. They're like potatoes or Jerusalem artichokes. So, if you were in a starvation situation, and this would be the only time I would do this, you could, in the dead of winter, break through the ice in a pond and dig into the mud and pull up those tubers. Obviously, that would be very dangerous, and the risk of hypothermia or falling in and getting trapped under the ice, could obviously outweigh the need for that food. But if it was a shallow, muddy area and you were really hungry, definitely an option. In the spring is really when I like them the best. They put up shoots, and those shoots can be peeled and either eaten raw or cooked. And they taste like cucumbers. And you can get a bunch of them. You can enjoy them as salad. You can cook them or peel them and pickle them and make dill pickles or sweet pickles out of them. They're just really excellent. As they get older, the mature stalks, to a point, while they're nice and fresh and green, can be peeled and chopped up and cooked somewhat like asparagus. The very young seed heads, which are also more of like a late spring, can be cooked and eaten with butter like you would corn on the cob. And when they're mature, the actual, the pod, the cattail they're named after, has pollen that can be used as a flour to make pancakes or mixed with a wheat flour to make bread. And it's super, super nutritious. And even the leaves, while not edible, are useful. They could be edible at a very young state, but they make great cordage. You in a survival situation, you could make rope out of cattail. You could make fishing nets out of cattail. You could make baskets out of cattail, and many native peoples have done that. It's one of the most useful plants, and where they grow, you're probably going to find rushes that we've talked about before, calamus that we talked about before, maybe duck potatoes, wapati, different ones, arrowhead. There's so many really good aquatic plants. And of course, whenever you have water, you also have wildlife. You can fish, you can gig for frogs, you can catch turtles, crawfish. Anywhere you can find a natural body of water that's clean is an absolute resource for food, really year-round, if you would put your mind to it. And that's not even counting, the ducks and wild game and geese that are going to come to it. So, I mean, really, every pond, lake, stream is a precious natural resource, which, I'm not a huge environmentalist, but I absolutely believe in protecting our water, because without that, we're in bad trouble. We're in big, bad shape. So let's talk about cattail pickles. And they're really good, actually. Like I said, much like cucumber, but with sort of a crunch like asparagus. Really nice. So get about a half pound or more peeled cattail shoots. Those are the green shoots, just as they're coming up out of the water, the mud, whatever. And on this, you could absolutely do a fermented pickle. But I'm going to give you the recipe for a vinegar pickle because it's easier. In my book, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking, I give options for, I think, every single pickle I do in the book, with a couple of exceptions, of either doing a vinegar pickle or a fermented pickle. Those exceptions would be like mushrooms, for instance. Mushrooms don't ferment well. They need to be cooked in hot. Well, they can be blanched, but anyway, they don't ferment well. And really, tomatoes, pumpkin, anything that's going to get mushy, does not, squashes and such, really doesn't make a very good fermented pickle at all. But most things do, and this certainly would. But we're going to use apple cider vinegar, a little water. You don't want straight vinegar; it's going to be way too strong. Dill, garlic, coriander seed, mustard seed, whole black peppercorns, a little sugar, a little salt, and some crushed red pepper. And obviously that is absolutely optional. If you want to use a different set of spices and herbs, use a different set of spices and herbs. Some people just like to use onion and sugar. Some people like to do a completely sweet pickle. I am not big on sweet pickles. I like a dill pickle. So this is to my taste. But, there's also pickle spice mixes you can get at a grocery store or something. Feel free to use one if you like. So here's the instructions. Super easy. Scale to quantity. So use as much of the ingredients as you need. I'm not going to give you exact measurements, but we're talking about a half pound or so of the cattail shoots. Bring equal parts of water and vinegar to a simmer. Dissolve in the salt and sugar to taste, very much to taste. Add the spices and herbs, pour over the cattail shoots, let pickle. That means let them sit on the counter for a little bit. Um, then you can keep them in the refrigerator or even can them because we're not using a naturally fermented product. We're using vinegar. You can absolutely hot water bath can them if you want to, and they'll be shelf stable for years. And I do mean for years. My grandmother was a great. Well, she did everything, all the home cooking and canning and all that. She made some fantastic pickles. I mean, she was known for her, and like bread and butter type pickles, or these like half sweet pickles, which is what I kind of grew up on. They were sour and sweet at the same time. Nobody in the community could make them as well as she did. And because we had the big farm and the big garden, she made tons of them. Last, maybe October, I opened up a jar of pickles that she pickled in 1985. And they were still crisp and delicious. They had never been refrigerated. In fact, she kept all her pickles and most of her preserves and jams and jellies, relishes, chutneys, all that kind of stuff, in a room out by the laundry room, which was actually in the back of my grandfather's workshop between there and the garage. It would easily get up to 110 degrees in the summer, every summer, even hotter some summers, and would go down. We would have to keep the doors closed and a light on there to keep them from freezing in the winter because, the jars would freeze and break, and every year that's how we lost a few. So, I mean, I'm talking like 30, what is that, 1985 to 2000, where are we? What is this, 2024? Those are almost 40-year-old canned pickles. Just as good as the day she put them up. I mean, and no canning book's going to tell you that. They're going to tell you that's insane. Don't do that. They're going to tell you they're only going to last for 3 years. 40-year-old pickles, just as good as the day she put them up. Also, pepper jelly. I found a whole box of pepper jelly from the same time. Absolutely delicious. Preserved pears. She put up a ton of pear jelly and just pear preserves. My absolute favorite, grape hull preserves. Those, my grandfather would make the wine out of the muscadine grapes. He'd crush the grapes. She'd take the grapes with some of the hulls, without the seeds, straight out the seeds, with some sugar and some of the juice, and she'd make these incredible grape hull preserves, which we would have on homemade biscuits made with buttermilk from the cows on the farm and butter from the cows on the farm and lard from the hogs on the farm, and put either grape hull preserves or a slice of country ham or my great grandfather's sweet gum honey, which you might know as Tupelo honey. He kept his hives by the swamp around the sweet gum trees, and it was as dark as molasses, and it would burn your throat. And I mean, that was amazing, and I wish everyone could have a childhood like that. That's why I'm such an advocate for buying land, homesteading, keeping that land, intact families, passing it down through generations. Letting your kids have a chance to know their grandparents and their great grandparents. I got to know 3 of my great grandparents, all kinds of great aunts and uncles, and that's why I know so much of these traditions that I know about is that intact family land being passed down from generation to generation. And, maybe your family hasn't been in America since the 1600s like mine has. You can start that tradition now. And 5 generations from now, your, great-great-grand, would that be? Yeah, great-grandkids would be telling their grandkids stories about you and the lessons you taught them. That's the goal. That's actually pretty much the goal of everything I do. And Yes, as William F. Buckley said, I stand athwart history yelling stop. Now let's get on to the herb for the week. And this is what's considered a common weed. It comes from my book, Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast. The previous came from the Spring Foraging Cookbook. The links will be in the show notes, as always. Malva neglecta. All right, Malva means it's in the mallow family. Anything that says mallow is a malva, or the other way around. This is the most common. Now, we've talked about how mallows can be anything from marshmallow to cheeses, as they call it in England mostly. Sometimes that's going to be called field mallow. It can be a hibiscus, a big beautiful hibiscus flower. It can be the rose of Sharon bush. Malva is a very big family, pretty much used interchangeably. This is one of the smaller ones. And Malva neglecta, well, let's think about our Latin for a minute. What would neglecta mean? Well, it means it's neglected. It's generally considered to be a weed, and it's one of those that's called cheeses in England and some European countries. When the flowers of the more weedy and the more herbal, the mallows we use more in herbal medicine as opposed to the big showy flowers of hibiscus or something, are in the bud stage. They look like little wheels of cheese. And for centuries, thousands of years, that's been a favorite snack for kids when they're out, walking through the pasture or playing in the grass. And that's where it gets that name. They're very good. They have a mucilaginous quality, somewhat like okra. Of course, being southern, I absolutely love okra. Grew up on okra, so I really do enjoy eating the malvas. And this one's also called cheeseweed common mallow, dwarf mallow, or just plain mallow. So, yeah, it's not the marsh mallow, which actually grows in marshy areas, but can absolutely be used the exact same way. So, marshmallow is the member of the family most used in herbal medicine, but they are basically interchangeable. I'd guess that and really, I think that's probably one of the mallows are one of the main medicinal herbs that people that don't know herbal medicine at all know about. But what they're usually thinking about is the marshmallow in the grocery store, the white puffy, stay puffed marshmallow. That's actually made with corn syrup. That's not made with the mallow plant. However, what it is an imitation of candies that were made from that mucilaginous liquid that can be pressed out of the mallow, cooked out of the mallow, really. And that's the real deal is actually quite good. It's dense, it's chewy, it's not that, light, fluffy, white candy that we call marshmallow now. But it comes from this exact same tradition, and who knows how long it goes back. I mean, there are recipes in ancient Roman cookbooks that are basically the predecessors to the marshmallow candies we know as today. You can go back to Apicius and such. And it probably originated actually in ancient Egypt. The mallows were very big in ancient Egypt. They're actually one of the few herbs mentioned in the Bible. So let's get into this Malva neglecta, which is one you're probably going to find real easy. Pull up a couple of pictures. You'll see that very recognizable mallow flower, and you'll start to realize how many plants are in the mallow family. And it's got a very uniquely shaped leaf. Very easy herb to identify. And, I usually start with the history of the herb, but, my favorite herbal teacher in America today is Dr. Patrick Jones. We know him as Doc Jones. Got to know him through the Grow Network. Grow Network opened a lot of doors for me, so I'm really sad that the forums have closed. But Doc Jones is not just an herbalist. He's a licensed naturopath. He's also a very successful veterinarian. And he considers mallows to be an essential herb, as do I. And he's a great guy. He's funny. He's adopted something like 27 kids, plus having some of his own. This is, it's his, what is his site? The Homegrown Herbalist, I believe. And he offers classes online. He does a lot of free videos. Funny guy, Absolutely, I wholeheartedly recommend Doc Jones's work, and not only at no financial benefit to me, but probably at a loss to me because people who learn from him are going to be less likely to buy my stuff. But he's really good, and I really think that much of him as a teacher, as an herbalist, and as just a really good person that I wholeheartedly endorse Dr. Patrick Jones. He says that, he recommends mallow in all cases of trauma. It has a very soothing quality. So this is something a dog gets hit by a car, it's one of the herbs he's going to use. This is something one of his kids gets hurt, it's one of the herbs he's going to use. But it's also particularly good. I mean, it soothes all tissue, but it's particularly good for irritation of the digestive tract. But he uses it in treating wounds that are beginning to turn gangrenous in his veterinary practice. I mean, when an animal comes in and the wound has gangrene and they're looking at having to amputate the leg or whatever, mallow oftentimes will heal that wound and reverse that essentially rotting tissue. It's wonderful. It's one of the best herbs. And another modern source was a book I mentioned a few times. I hesitated to buy this book for a long time because of the title. It's called The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. You've probably seen it. It's promoted very heavily online. They have a great chapter on mallow. Okay, it's I think my book, Herbal Medicine for Homesteaders, Permaculture People, whatever the title is. I think, or my book on the Encyclopedia of Medicinal Bitters has much of the same information, and it's cheaper. And of course, I want you to buy my stuff, but I gotta admit, The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies is quite good on several herbs. I just didn't like the title because this information is not lost. I'm one of the ones preserving it, so I was almost felt insulted by the title. But it is actually a very good book. It actually is. And it's actually a quite handsome book. It's very well done, actually. So I'm not knocking it at all. In fact, I have a copy. So they're listing for mallow, which I'm reading from my copy of their book. Useful for acid indigestion, peptic ulcers, leaky gut, and digestive issues. I'm not sure, it was written by Nicole Appelian, PhD, and Claude Davis. I'm not sure which one of them is actually writing this entry, but the person says, I use the root of the marshmallow plant to treat stomach problems caused by excess stomach acid and for leaky gut. It is effective in neutralizing the acid and relieving the symptoms. The root has a moderate laxative effect, which makes it useful in treating intestinal problems such as colitis, ileitis, irritable bowel syndrome, diverticulitis. I also use it as an ingredient in my leaky gut blend, as it forms a protective layer around perforations of the gut. Also useful for dry coughs, bronchitis, bronchial asthma, congestion, and pleurisy. Because marshmallow is so good at treating the membranes, it makes a good antidote for respiratory problems. It relieves swelling and irritation of the mucous membranes and calms the respiratory system. It is not, however, an expectorant. They also list the herb as useful for teething pains, skin irritations, inflammations and swellings, skin ulcers, injuries, and for removing foreign objects. And sticking with modern for a while, we'll go to Plants for Future, which is the very best herbal website, not owned by me. I do think JudsonCarroll.com and SouthernAppalachianHerbs.blogspot.com have more and more in-depth information on herbs than just about any source on the net. But one of my favorites that I always cite, I don't think I've ever written a single entry on a plant where I haven't mentioned Plants for Future. They did a fantastic job. And I think that's naturalmedicinalherbs.net. They list marshmallow as the mallow that they prefer. Marshmallow is a very useful household medicinal herb. Its soothing demulcent properties make it very effective in treating inflammations and irritations of the mucous membranes, such as the alimentary canal. the urinary and respiratory organs. The root counters excess stomach acid, peptic ulcerations, and gastritis. It is applied externally to bruises, sprains, aching muscles, insect bites, skin inflammations, splinters, etc. The whole plant, but especially the root, is antitussive. That means it helps stop coughing. Demulcent, which means softening. Diuretic, removes excess fluid. Highly emollient, means softening. Slightly laxative. And infusion of the leaves is used to treat cystitis and frequent urination. Cystitis is the infection that's caused by a bladder infection, the secondary and more dangerous of the two. It can cause scarring and a lot of bad stuff. The leaves are harvested in autumn when the plant is just coming into flower and can be dried for later use. The root can be used in an ointment for treating boils and abscesses. The root is best harvested in autumn, preferably from a 2-year-old plant, and is dried for later use. All right, so now we'll get into the historical references, because I get so much feedback telling me how much people love the lore of plants as much as I do, especially when it comes to herbal medicine. And Miss Grieve, writing in 1931, started just as I would with the book of Job, Job 34. We read of the mallow being eaten in time of famine, but it is doubtful whether this was really a true mallow. Canon Tristram thinks it was some saline plant, perhaps of the orac or a sea purslane. I actually disagree with that, because it doesn't seem to have come from the coastal areas, the one that Job was referencing, but probably was a plant that originated somewhere in Egypt, or a less. I mean, I'm not saying Egypt doesn't have access to the sea. I'm saying it doesn't seem to be a coastal plant. And of course, by the time of the ancient Greeks and the Roman tradition, we have a lot of information on it. In fact, Horace and Martial, who was I think he was a Greek poet, if I remember correctly, mentioned the laxative properties of marshmallow leaves and root, and Virgil tells of the fondness of goats and foliage of the mallow, and that's not necessarily going to be a coastal. I guess they're talking like saltwort or orach, sea purslane. I could see that. I could see why this person would have taken issue with that, but yeah, Job wasn't exactly sitting on the beach. Anyway, Pliny said, well, let's start with, she mentions that Dioscorides extols it as a remedy in the ancient days, and that it was not only valued as a medicine, but was used, especially the musk mallow, to decorate the graves of friends. And I think somewhere we'll get into, was it one of the ancient writers that said a diet of mallows was actually his preferred. Was that Virgil? Anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute. But Pliny said, "Whoever shall take a spoonful of mallows shall that day be free from all diseases that may come to him." All mallows contain abundant mucilage, and the Arab physicians in early times used the leaves as a poultice to suppress inflammation. So again, that kind of takes us away from the coastal. We're really talking, the Arabs. We're talking the deserts of the Middle East, where dry skin conditions, cracking skin, dehydration, and intestinal upset was something people dealt with on a daily basis. And yes, mallow would have been one of the most valued of the herbs. So she gets into, she says it's a popular food in France. They use the young tops, make salads or cook them. She goes on and on. I'm going to skip over a lot of this. It's all in the book, if you're interested. So by the monastic tradition that began in Christian Rome and spread throughout Europe, mallow was an official herb in the apothecary. It was grown in the physic gardens of the monastery. The Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne actually commanded that it be grown in gardens throughout the empire in a document called the Capitulaire around 802 AD. Let's see. Let me back up from that just a little bit. Dioscorides wrote 2 mallows. The Malach, I guess, that was one they were actually cultivating, and he liked it better than the wild mallow. Said it was good for a bad stomach and good for the bowels, especially effective for the intestines and bladder. Raw leaves chewed with a little bit of salt and rubbed on with honey are able to cure ulcers of the inner eyelid, essentially. So let's see. The ancient Greeks often used urine as part of herbal remedies. I know that may freak you out. Well, they did the same thing in India and China. Applied with urine, it cures running sores of the head and dandruff. So, probably not something you want to do, but it's interesting for historical reference. The boiled leaves pounded in small pieces and applied with oil help burns and erysipelas, which is a streptococcal skin infection. A decoction of it is a softening bath for the womb, and it is fit in suppositories for pains of hunger in the intestines, also used for the womb and the perineum. The broth boiled together with the roots helps all poisonings, but those who drink it must continuously vomit it up. So they were using it to help as an emetic to get rid of some poison somebody had taken. It is good for those bitten by harvest spiders, and it brings out the milk. In other words, the minagogue. It helps mother's milk. The mixed with the seeds of the wild lotus, taken as a drink with wine, lessens disorders of the bladder, and the wild mallow, which is really the one we're talking about, has a rose-like flower, so it's sort of like the ancestor to the hibiscus and different ornamental mallows we think of now. So it's very good for wounds, inflamed glands, such as from mumps, when boiled with honey and water or wine. Swelling, suppuration, inflamed breasts, disorders of the perineum, bruises, flatulent tumors, and distension of the nerves. It dissolves, ripens, breaks up, and brings to a scar. Boil. Okay, he's talking boils. It would help bring him to a head. And boiled and kneaded together with swine's grease or goose grease or turpentine. It was good for inflammation of the womb, and a decoction of it does the same and also helps in expelling the bodily wastes. A decoction of the root taken as a drink with wine helps dysentery, pain in the hips, trembling, and those troubled with hernia. It soothes toothache, boiled with vinegar, and the mouth washed with it. The seed, either green or dry, pounded into small pieces and rubbed on with vinegar, cleans, vitiligo. I can't really pronounce it. It's a form of leprosy. So again, we're seeing it's very soothing and healing to the skin. Let's see. Rubbed on with oxalis or wood sorrel, it prevents hurts from poisonous beasts. Probably doesn't. Effective against dysentery, vomiting blood, excessive discharges from the bowels. A decoction of the seed taken as drink is good against bee stings and those of all small creatures, taken as a drink with wine. The leaves with a little oil are laid on bites and on those who are burned. Again, it's very soothing, good for wounds and burns. The root thickens water, and it goes on about that. And that, the mucilaginous quality of the root thickening the water is how we eventually get marshmallows. So by the time we get to St. Hildegard von Bingen, around 1080 or so, she said marshmallow prevails against fevers. If a person has a fever of any kind, he should pour marshmallow into vinegar and drink it in the morning on an empty stomach and at night. The fever, whatever its nature, will cease. A person who has pain in his head should crush marshmallow with a bit less sage and mix in a little olive oil. He should warm it near the fire and place it on his forehead. He should tie it on with a cloth and go to bed, and he will be better. Continuing the German folk medicine tradition, getting into the 1800s, Father Nape wrote of Althea rosea, that means the rose-flowered Althea, or more what we know as the modern mallow. Among the flowers in the garden, mallow must not be missing. When the good Creator painted their blossoms so pleasing to the eye, he poured a drop of medicinal sap into the paint for every little leaf. Mallow blossoms, especially those of the black mallow, prepared as a tea, cure throat infirmities and loosen the phlegm of the chest. These blossoms are generally mixed with those of mullein. For vapors, used for vapors, whether it be for inhaling or particularly for ear vapors, the mallow proves of great service. Well, the steam, or actually sort of warm tea, of the mallow and the mullein flower, excellent for swollen, inflamed, and even infected ears, sinuses, bronchial issues. One of the go-to remedies, though, especially for earaches and such. Um, Sometimes you might want to use some garlic oil with that, but really good. Brother Aloysius, who was Father Nape's protege, said of mallow, Mallow rotundifolia, which means large leaf, used for inflammation of the mucous membranes, consumption, used in enemas for inflammations in all complaints of the respiratory organs, and of Althea officinalis, the marshmallow, the one we use more in herbal medicine, used for bladder complaints, painful urination, chest complaints, painful cough, sore throat, heavy bleeding, at the onset of pneumonia, inflammation of the stomach, diarrhea, dysentery, and other intestinal complaints. Used externally for any type of inflammation, wasp or bee stings. And of course it's called officinalis because it goes back to the Holy Roman Emperor who said it should be grown in every herb garden used in herbal medicine, which means it went into the officina of the monasteries and became official medicine of herbal medicine. That's actually what that means. When you see an herb that says officinalis or something similar, you know it's one of the traditional and most potent and useful herbs in herbal medicine. At least those that were known of in the Middle Europe 2,000 years ago. So Gerard in the English tradition around 1500 says marshmallow is moderately hot but drier than the other mallows. The roots and seeds thereof are more dry and likewise of digesting, softening, or mollifying nature. Mollifying also means softening, so a little bit redundant. The virtues. The leaves of the marshmallow are of power to digest and mitigate pain. They be with good effect mixed with fomentations and poultices against the pain of the sides, of the stone, and of the bladder. And yes, very good. In fact, Doc Jones often recommends marshmallow for kidney and bladder stones, taken with something like viburnum or skullcap or something that's going to relax those the tissue, relax the tubes, as he puts it. The mallow lubricates, and then you have something like a diuretic like parsley or something like that, asparagus. There's so many that will help move it on through. So often used that way. Decoction of the leaves, drunk doth the same. They be also of service to take away any matter of pain, and they not only assuage pain, which proceedeth from the stone, but also is very good to cause the same to distend more easily and to pass forth. So that is the Elizabethan version of what I just said. The roots and seeds are profitable for the same purpose, and the decoction of the roots helpeth the bloody flux. Yet, and that's usually bloody diarrhea, by the way, yet not by any binding quality, but by mitigating the gripings and frettings thereof, for they do not bind at all. They cure the bloody flux by having things added unto them, such as the root of bistort, tormental, and leaves of pomegranates and such like. So, tormental or wild geranium, or even cultivated geranium, The mucilage or slimy juice of the roots is mixed very effectually with all oils, ointments, and plasters that slacken and mitigate pain. The roots boiled in wine and the decoction given to drink expel the stone and gravel, help the bloody flux, sciatica, cramps, and convulsions. The roots of the marshmallow, the leaves of the common mallow, and the leaves of violets boiled in water until they are very soft, and a little of that water that is left stamped in a stone mortar and added thereunto a quantity of fenugreek and linseed powder, the root of black byrony, which is very dangerous herb, you want to be very careful with that, and some good quality of grease stamped together form a poultice, and applied, very warm, mollify, and soften opustumes and hard swelling, swellings of the joints, and sores of the mother. It consumeth all cold tumors, blastings, and windy outgrowths. It cureth rifts in the fundament. It comforteth, defendeth, preserveth, dangers, green wounds, and any manner of accidents that may happen thereunto. It helpeth digestion in them, and bring old ulcers to maturation. Now that's hard to say. Okay, so the byrony is irritating and warming. You could probably leave that out. He's basically just describing a poultice, which is going to help with wounds and ulcerations and boils and swellings. Much like Doc Jones says he used mallow in even gangrenous wounds. The seeds dried, beaten into a powder, and given a drink, stoppeth the bloody flusk and the lask and all their issues of blood. So, glad I got through that. Now, Culpeper 100 years later, said it was a very good woman's herb. Let's see. He liked it for hot agues or fevers, other distempers of the body, applied warm as a poultice much. Said it was good for easing pains and torments of the belly. Would help increase mother's milk. I'm paraphrasing because I'm tired of reading Elizabethan English for right this moment. The leaves, the leaves bruised and laid into the eyes with a little honey take away the impostumes of them. Leaves bruised and rubbed on any place stung by bees, wasps, or the like, presently take away the pain, redness, and swelling that rise upon. See if there's anything he says that we don't know. Mallows boiled in oil and applied takes away all roughness of the skin. Also scurf and dandruff. Scurf is sort of like psoriasis, essentially. Dandruff and dry scabs of the head or any other parts, if they be anointed therewith, or eczema. Anyway, good for scaldings and burnings. St. Anthony's fire, and all hot, red, and painful swellings in any part of the body. Flowers boiled in oil or water, whereunto a little honey and alum is put. Makes an excellent gargle to wash, cleanse, and heal any sore mouth or throat. And I think we're good there. Going back to Miss Grieve, and we'll just get her official uses. The great demulcent and emollient properties of marshmallow make it useful in inflammations and irritations of the alimentary canal and of the urinary and respiratory organs. The roots being boiled in water give out half their weight in a gummy matter like a starch. Decoctions of the plant, especially the roots, are very useful where the natural mucus has been abraded from the coats of the intestines. The decoction it is excellent for painful complaints of the urinary organs, exerting a relaxing effect upon the passage, as well as acting curatively. The decoction is also effective in curing bruises, sprains, any aches of the muscles and sinews. In hemorrhage from the urinary organs, it has been recommended to use the powdered root boiled in milk. The action of marshmallow root upon the bowels is unaccompanied by any astringency. So it soothes the bowels, it helps things along, doesn't increase cramping or really dry things up. She said, boiled in wine or milk, marshmallow will relieve diseases of the chest, constituting a popular remedy for coughs, bronchitis, whooping cough, etc. Generally in combination with other remedies, is frequently given in form of a syrup, which is best adapted for infants and children. Now, going to the Polish tradition, Sophie Hodderitz Nab says that the ancient herbalist Kluck, Polish herbalist, felt all parts of the plant to be useful both internally and externally in a variety of ways. To bathe in, to use as incense, to use in difficult bursts, for activating a sluggish stomach, and as treatment for painful urination and hysteria. Getting back into the American tradition, Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests, written in the 1860s, well, 1850s, somewhere in that range. Talks of the Mallow tribe, the Malvaceae, saying they abound in mucilage and are totally destitute of all unwholesome qualities. Well, what does that mean? It means they're good. That's a double negative. Destitute of all unwholesome qualities. They're safe, they're good, they're nutritious, they're easy to use. He mentions the low mallows, including Mallow rotundifolia, and the marshmallow, which he lists as Hibiscus machiotus. I'm not sure how I pronounce that, but anyway, starting with the low mallows, which is one of which we'll be talking about today. It is very emollient and is employed in catarrhal, that's congested, dysenteric, excess fluid, and nephritic diseases, that refers to the kidneys. And where a mucilaginous fluid is required, it is administered in the shape of an emollient enemata and forms a good suppurating and relaxing cataplasm in internal inflammation. Wow. Enema and poultice, essentially. Highly regarded by the ancients. And Hippocrates employed it for gargles, as an application to heated and inflamed parts, as a vehicle for pectoral and anodyne medicines, and for those administered in the disease of the urinary passage. The root, seeds, and whole plant are mucilaginous, are employed in catarrhal and dysenteric and nephritic complaints, as well as emollient injection wherever an emollient substance is required. Yeah, we'll finish with his entry here on marshmallow, which is they're all mallows, but some are called hibiscus. This also possesses demulcent properties and is a convenient substitute for the above. All right. So again, like I said, you can pretty much use them interchangeably. You can even use Rose of Sharon. And in regard to food, the food value is actually worth noting. Yule Gibbons enjoyed the roots boiled and then fried with butter and onions, and was also able to whip the mucilaginous slime left in the water into a substitute for egg whites. The wild mallow, as I said, called cheeses, is a common forage food plant. Mallow is also included in the Great Swedish Bitters, which I believe in and take daily, probably formulated by Paracelsus. I believe the great herbalist Rosemary Gladstar has a recipe for homemade marshmallow candies made from real mallow in at least one of her books, and I think free on her website, so be sure to check that out. It's a great plant to learn. It's a good food plant. It's an excellent medicinal plant. I really would put it in like the top 10, 12 essential herbs. And there's probably 2 or 3 growing around you that are considered weeds, and probably 5 or 6 you could put in your garden as ornamental plants. It's just sort of a no-brainer. So, y'all, have a great week. I'll talk to you next time, and I hope you enjoy my picking on the guitar.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.